I rise today, and I will confess, I rise today a bit angry about this bill. This bill cooked up in back rooms, dropped at midnight, cloaked in fake numbers, with huge handouts to big Republican donors. It loots our country for some of the least deserving people you could imagine. When I first got here, this chamber filled me with awe and wonderment. Our leader, Harry Reid, frequently called me his happiest senator. Such was the awe and wonderment that I felt here. Today, I feel disgust. This piece of legislation is corrupt. This piece of legislation is crooked. This piece of legislation is a rotten racket. This place feels to me today like a crime scene. Get some of that yellow tape and put it around this chamber. The midnight transfer of wealth in this bill is disgusting. There's a backdrop here. The backdrop here is the wealth inequality in our country already, in which the wealthiest 1% of our population own 30% of the wealth, and the poorest half of our population together only own 3% of the wealth. Top 1%, third of the wealth. Bottom half of the population by income, 3% of the wealth. And against that backdrop, this bill transfers wealth from middle-class families to giant corporations, billionaires, and mega-billionaires. And it transfers wealth from our children and grandchildren to present-day billionaires by adding $5 trillion to the debt limit to run up the debt of the country to fund the tax giveaways to these special interests and wealthy billionaires. How do they do that? Take away health care from 16 million Americans. Give huge tax breaks to billionaires. Most families have someone sit down once a month and go through the bills, and you try to figure out what bills you can pay. You may not pay the whole insurance bill. You may just pay the minimum. You may not pay your whole credit card bill. You may just pay the minimum. You're aware of exactly how much money you have because you need to make those payments. That's kitchen table world. Billionaire world is different. You have a family office, you never see bills, you don't even know how much money you have, not even to the nearest $100,000. And you don't care, because you got more than you could ever spend in your life. You could pay taxes, like regular people, but there's something about your acquisition of wealth that can't stop. So you won't pay taxes like a normal person. You demand special treatment. You pay less of a tax rate than a firefighter, for God's sake. And that's not enough for you. Now you come here to this Senate floor wanting even more favors. You already don't know how much money you have. You could pay regular taxes and it wouldn't take a day from sunning on your private island, a day from cruising in your private yacht, a jet trip on your private jet, a ski trip to your private chalet. Nothing in your life would change if you had to pay taxes like a regular person, but you just don't want to. And the third is, oh, I should add, on the tax breaks, a lot of it goes to corporations. This bill doesn't just give big tax breaks to big corporations. It gives big tax breaks to big corporations that move jobs and investment offshore away from America. And it just doesn't give tax breaks to corporations that move jobs and investment offshore away from America. It gives tax breaks for doing that. It gives tax breaks for offshoring American jobs and offshoring American investment. It is the world's worst tax policy. It takes an already corrupted tax code and bends it even further in the favor of mega billionaires and big offshoring corporations. And last, what does this bill do that causes this transfer of wealth from regular people to the wealthy? It raises your costs to raise their profits. And I'm here to talk about one way that that happens. Because of this bill, your electric bills will go up. The people behind this bill are counting on you not to know how that works. So, I'm going to take a minute here, and I'm going to tell you how that works. There are some rules for the grid about how this works. Generators who want to sell power to the grid put in a bid, and they give a price at which they will sell their electricity. You can imagine on this graph that each of these little hash marks is a different generation facility, and each has made a bid at its best price. Once it's got the stack of bids, the grid manager, as the load comes onto the grid, dispatches the cheapest generators first, and then goes up the stack to the more and more expensive ones. As demand rises, the costs go up. The last one that's called on, the most expensive one that's called on, sets the price for the whole grid. And this last one, the one that the price setter on the grid, almost always a fossil fuel plant. Okay? It's almost always a fossil fuel plant. So if you look at this graph, you'll see here, this measures the price that's charged to put those electrons on the grid for consumers. And this is the energy demand. How much consumers are asking? What does the grid need to supply? And if you look at the top line, this is the world without renewables. This is an all fossil fuel system, let's say. Baseload nuke, okay, throw that in. And as the demand goes up, the prices go up because more and more of these generators have to come online. And eventually, let's say you get to this point where you've got this much load on the grid and you've got this much supply and the price is set by that generator. That's the world without clean energy. Now you add clean energy, you add renewables to this equation. What do we know about the renewables? They're almost always cheaper. They're almost never the price setter. So they fill in down here. And they fill in below the price of the fossil fuel plant. So if you've got load requirement X and you live in fossil fuel only world, you're going to be paying that price for energy on the grid. All of it, because it's set by that price setter generator. But if you filled in with renewables, then you're down here for price for that much load. You're saving huge amounts of money. The grid is way more efficient with renewables in the mix. By the time you get to the same price that you had here for load X, for fossil fuel, you're all the way out here. You got all this extra load served before you raise that price. That's the theory. That's how the system works. Let's see how clean energy fits in a specific area. Let's look at Texas. Oh, and by the way, last year, 95% of the power that came on the grid that filled in here was clean energy. If this bill kills clean energy growth, which is its intention, then it's going to kill off the power source that provided 95% of what was added to the grid last year. It is going to be a big, big hit. So let's look at the Texas grid, which is easy to talk about because it's a standalone grid. And somebody just did a study of the Texas grid. And they found that with renewables, and Texas is 30% renewables, okay? So we're in the with renewables situation. With renewables, the average price last August was $39 per megawatt hour. This was $39. And then they calculated what happened if you backed out all the solar that had been added. If it weren't for the solar driving this price down, instead of $39 per megawatt hour, it would have been somewhere between $55 and $90 per megawatt hour. Minimum $25 differential. Maybe more than twice the cost. The punchline, quoting from the report, had there been no growth in solar energy between 2018 and 2024, wholesale electric prices in 24 would have been at least 40% higher. Without the clean energy growth of that 95% of supply that came onto the grid that was clean energy last year, electricity prices would have been 40% higher. And where would that 40% have gone? It would have gone into the pockets of the fossil fuel industry that was setting that price as everybody had to pay more and more and more. So when you see the fossil fuel industry come here and take this shot at its clean energy competition in this bill after having flooded that side with political money, they're going to make a fortune off of this. And consumers will pay. That's how this bill robs you. It puts you back onto the fossil fuel side of that curve, not onto the clean energy added part of the curve, which lowers prices so dramatically. And as the report concluded, I'm quoting again, this isn't speculation or modeling, it's what actually happened in one of America's largest electricity markets. And by the way, while the fossil fuel polluters are out trying to damage their competition using the power of government and the influence of their dark money operation to do so, they are also damaging America's competitiveness against China. China's already putting 25 times the solar that we are putting onto their grid. That gives them huge advantages as they construct solar panels, design solar technologies, and offer that to the rest of the world. We're in a world market for solar technology, just like we're in a world market for electric vehicles. And the fossil fuel industry's desire to destroy the American solar market and to destroy the American electric vehicle market is about as unpatriotic as you can get, because it is taking these two technologies and saying, go for it, China, we're out. We're out. have the entire international market for solar and for energy. We're not going to compete. We're going to load up our people with new taxes. We're going to tear away the subsidies. And by the way, the fossil fuel industry that's telling you this, they're the recipients of the biggest subsidy in world history. They get $700 billion a year in the United States alone from being allowed to pollute for free. It violates market economics to pollute for free. Milton Friedman, the most conservative economist, will tell you it's not proper market theory when somebody's polluting for free. The cost of the pollution should be in the price of the product. So they already benefit, the fossil fuel industry already benefits from the biggest subsidy in world history, $700 billion with a B, $700 billion every single year to compete unfairly against clean energy. And on top of that, they want to rip away the investments that have been made, and they want to put a new tax on clean energy, and they want to drive consumer prices back up to their fossil fuel model. There's some really big losers in this big loser of a bill. Anybody who cares about adding $5 trillion to our national debt, that's a big loss. Comes through in interest rates for people with car loans and home loans. Healthcare, 16 million people getting chucked off their healthcare. Hospitals and nursing homes facing receivership as their revenues dry up from a nearly $1 trillion hit to their revenue streams. Taxpayers getting clobbered by an already corrupt tax code that this makes even worse for the individuals benefiting the most from the corruption of the tax code and who are the least deserving of our solicitude and who are the most able to pay. I promise you, there are people who will not know they even got this $300,000 individual billionaire benefit because they're so rich already it won't even count. And on the flip side of the coin, if they had to pay taxes like a normal American, they wouldn't even notice that either. They'd still be able to sun on their island, cruise on their yacht, ski in their chalet, and jet in their jet. And yet, we're breaking the bank to the tune of $5 trillion to take care of those people. Creepy billionaires who can't even count their wealth, but for some reason insist on coming to Congress and just seizing even more, looting the public trough. Offshoring corporations who get a special tax benefit for offshoring jobs and investment, moving them away from America. Remember, this was the America First agenda, not when you look into the weeds of this crooked bill. So creepy billionaires, offshoring corporations, and, of course, fossil fuel polluters who want to pollute. They've got all the money in the world. They've made massive profits. They could do their own carbon removal and make their product safer. They choose not to. They choose not to because they want to pollute and they want to kill their competition so they can pollute more and profit more and drive up consumer prices, as I showed here. And guess what? The creepy billionaires, the offshoring corporations, and the fossil fuel polluters, what do they have in common? Huge donors to the Republican Party. That's what this bill is about. It's not about taking care of the economy. It's not about taking care of the public. It's payback to big special interests and billionaires who provide the dark money funding that floats the Republican Party, and now they're demanding payback for the majorities that they bought. There is a wasp, Mr. President, that lays its larvae inside another bug. And the larvae of the wasp inside that other bug are able to take over the nervous system of that other bug. They can take over the command and control system of the bug, and they start driving the bug around from the inside. They make it do what the larvae wants it to do. They make it go where the larvae want to be. They make it hang where the larvae want it to hang, and then the larvae consume it from the inside. They eat it, and they turn into the next generation of wasps. That's a pretty good analogy for what has happened here. Those creepy billionaires, those fossil fuel polluters, those big offshoring corporations have taken over the command and control system of the Republican Party. The bug over there is being marched around by those special interests doing exactly what it's told. And it doesn't care about the 16 million people coming off insurance, it doesn't care about the added pollution, doesn't care about the increased cost, doesn't care about the unfairness, doesn't care about making the tax code more corrupt, because the special interests are in that bug running that show. I yield the floor.